this time we're going to actually do something beyond just like talking about the software. We're talking about selections, right? In my last video, I told you I really want to talk about selections. So I'm going to go again into a file new, or a new file when you launch Photoshop, or Command N, even better. And this time I'm going to put my own custom, size, because we're going to draw together a ranch in Photoshop. So what I want you to do is choose pixels right here and do 600 by 600. So 600 by 600 pixel. We're going to do 72 because we are not printing this. It's more for practice. Remember, the bigger the resolution, the bigger the file size. So unless you do know for sure I need to print it, I need to print a high quality, just go with 72, just because it's simpler in terms of, smaller files to store in your computer or even on the cloud. And then I want to choose RGB for the reason I told you earlier. I have a larger color color gamut. And I'm going to start with a white screen. And in the color profile, instead of the working RGB, I know that Adobe RGB 1998 is a nice big kind of universal standard for a color profile. So I'm going to assign that, especially because I'm working within an Adobe software. So that's kind of the more logical one. Again, we can talk more about color management, but also taking a class will make a world of difference. But I will here and there, give you some key information, just the basics that you need to function in digital imaging. So again, 600 by 600 pixels. Orientation doesn't matter in this case, right? Because it's a square, 72 ppi, RGB, larger, colors, white, and RGB, Adobe RGB 1998 for color profile. By the way, what is the color profile, if anybody cares to know, is actually a file that gets created with your composition, what I just, started, but it's behind the scenes. So it's not something you can tinker with. It's basically a little file with text that says this file was created on this date with this software with this profile. Basically it specifies it's like an ID for this file. It's like, if we were talking about Enrica, you would say Enrica's ID is she's Italian. She was born in this year. So imagine that, and there's a kind of somewhere in a database, right, an Italian register office, or even the American one, there's something that has information about me. So imagine that the color profile is the same as information about your file. So with that said, I'm going to do Command 0 because it enlarges my canvas to fit in the whole screen. It is always lovely. I'm going to keep the layers out because you'll see we'll tinker with layers and I want you to understand them. So what I'm going to do first and foremost is shows you how can you draw in Photoshop. So if I go, for example, on this, it's called the marquee tool. By the way, up here you have the selection tool. And if you hold on to it, is V. The most common is this move tool that allows you to grab things and move things around. And the second one that is used very seldomly is the artboard tool that allows you to change the size of your artboard and do things. But most of the time you kind of know what you're doing at the beginning. So you don't need to change that. And there are other ways to tinker with the artboard. So think of this tool as the move tool, allows you to move things. V is the shortcut. And then this is the marquee tools, is the M is the shortcut that allows you to create selections. It allows you to select a piece of your screen. So in the case of the this one, if I click and drag, it doesn't mean that right now I have any content. As you can see, I have just a blank background. Nothing is in my file beside that. But it does have what you would call in potential this shape. So if I fill this on a separate layer, then I do have content, that piece of content. But when you see these marching ants, that means in potential, it can become a shape. So first and foremost, I'm going to do Command D for deselect. Command R, that will pull out these beautiful little rulers. They're called rulers. And you can see my screen is 600 by 600. And sure enough, it goes from 0 to 600. I'm going to click in this vertical ruler that also tells me that my screen is 0 by 600 in height. So I'm going to click in it and drag out this line to 300, to exactly the middle of the screen. These are called guides. And again, you're not adding any content to your file, just like the marching ants. It's just something that guides your work, that, starts your work. Then I'm going to, from the top, I'm going to click and drag and move my guide to about 150, maybe actually 200. Let's do 200. And then another one to 400, maybe 450. It's up to you. I think let's do 400. There we are. So my wrench will have the two circles at the intersection of these guides and then the stem in between. So if I use the marquee tool, the elliptical marquee, and I click and drag, you'll see that it starts from the top left. And that's kind of a problem, right? Because we wanted to start from this has to be the center of that perfect circle. So how do I make that happen? If I'm going to do Command D to deselect. If I hold Option and then click and drag, you can see now it starts from the center. But it's still an ellipse. What if I want it to be a perfect circle? I'm going to hold Shift as well. So Option Shift allows you to create a perfect circle and have it grow from the perfect center of the circle. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take the marquee, elliptical marquee, look up here. Here we have different modality for the selection. You have new selection, add to the selection, subtract, or select the intersection between two shapes. So I'm going to always start with new selection. I'm going to click in the center right here, and I'm going to start dragging and then hold Option and Shift. So by holding Option and Shift, I'm making a perfect circle starting from the center. I'm going to let the mouse go first and the key next. And that means I got the top of my wrench. I'm going to redo it really quick. Command D. I'm going to click in the center, drag, hold Option so it starts from the center, and then hold Shift so it's a perfect circle. Then I'm going to let the mouse go and then the keys go. Now I need the stem of the wrench. So I'm going to go with the add to the selection. Be careful because if you are not in add, when you click and drag, if you're in new selection, you will lose this. That is a bummer, right? So I also need to switch to a rectangle. Now notice when I switched to the rectangle, now it tricked me, right? It went back to new selection. So I need to also be aware when you switch shape to go up here and make sure you're in the right modality. I'm in add, I'm in rectangle, and if I click and drag, you'll see my cursor has a little plus sign. That means whatever you do is going to add to your current selection. And I can even go over, the first one, and it's going to simply add to the first shape. I need to also create a circle down here for a wrench, so I'm going to go back to elliptical. I'm going to make sure I'm still in add, and again, I'm going to click and drag like I did earlier, and then hold Option and Shift so it's the exact size, the exact circle starting from the center, and I want it a little smaller than the prior one, so this is perfect. I'm going to let the mouse go and then the keys go. So I'm shaping up my wrench. Now if it's a wrench, as you guys all know, needs a cutout here. So I need to switch now to, first of all, a square, because the cutout is a square shape or a rectangular shape. I need to switch to subtract, and then I'm going to click and drag to subtract that shape. It's not symmetrical, right? So I'm going to do Command Z. I'm going to redo it. Now, I could have put guides there that told me exactly how to make it symmetrical. But you see, when I mouse over to this direction, it shows me it's pretty good. Again, I need to do a hole right down here, right? So I'm going to switch to circle because the hole down here is circular. I'm going to make sure I'm in subtract again. I'm going to click and drag at the center, add Option and Shift, and let go. Now, if you remember, though, the wrench doesn't have a perfect hole here. Only half is the hole that allows you to hook it to a nail on a board, but this is generally filled. So what do? I switch to the rectangular again. I switch to add this time because I'm closing this, right? I'm adding to here, and then I'm going to click and drag, and now I have my shape. So I do have my shape, but it's just a selection. It's not the wrench yet, right? It's not what I need. If I want it to be what I need to click plus, and I need to add color. Another thing you can do to save this selection, and I want to introduce this concept of channels down here. Channels are actually the color information of your image. And you have a red, green, and blue combo color. You have a red, green, and blue individual channels. We'll talk about, you know, this channels palette a lot later on. But what I want you to know for now is that it allows you to basically see the color combination in your composition, but it also allows you to save selections and you see them in the channels. How does it work? If you go in Select, Save Selection, right here, and I'm going to call it Wrench, right there. And I'm telling it I want it to be a new channel. So you'll see it shows up right here, and I'm going to say okay. So there it is. Now I saved my selection. If I deselect, Command D, I can always get it back. And you might say, how do you get it